That was literally the strategy. Just like we need them to at least know about it. So we came up with this idea of like, well, let's just buy a van and wrap it with a big old Clerk logo and just park it in front of the office. This is a way to brute force it a little bit.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. I'm joined today by Colin, who is the founder, co-founder, and CEO of Clerk.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I should say thanks for coming back.
Yeah, of course. The first one was a lot of fun. Do you remember when it was?
I think it was November 2022 or something.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Just like right before it started to go.
Yes.
Is how I think of that time.
Yeah. So I think it was like, you were talking about all the stuff you were doing. And I think actually at the time, I hadn't actually come across Clerk before we connected. And then I think 2 months later, Clerk was completely dominating my Twitter feed.
Just everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose you're asking how that might have happened.
I think so. And actually, probably before we say that, we should probably say what Clerk is as well.
Oh, yeah. So Clerk builds developer tools for authentication. Easiest way to think about it is we give you React components for like sign up, sign in, user profile. You just drop it in and everything just works.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like, I think at the time you were talking about like kind of like the next generation of Auth0, focused on like Jamstack.
That's right. Yeah. I think we don't say Jamstack as much anymore. I think something's happened. It's
not cool anymore to say
It's
Jamstack.
front-end cloud now. But I think for this JavaScript React ecosystem is broadly how we think about it. And then, I think that this kind of architecture is just different than the historical full stack Rails app or Django app that Auth0 is kind of built for. And so we've just taken a whole new approach and it started from first principles and realized like, oh, developers would love just a drop-in component. And so started there and a lot had to change to make a drop-in component work. But that's what we see is like the new preferred DX. Like the component is the new API is what we like to say, because it's just a lot easier to get started with.
Yeah, and you do so much great stuff out of the box. Like you have like organizations management and stuff like that. It's very, very handy.
Yeah. So, I think even before that, just in the user management product, like 2FA comes baked into the user profile, and like your user after they sign up can self-serve into 2FA. They can choose between TOTP or SMS and turn off SMS if they're principled about security like they should be. There's user profile uploads, and like a lot of that stuff just doesn't normally come out of the box in auth solutions, whether it's an Auth0 or even an open source tool. It's things that you're often building after the initial setup yourself. And so we really tried to build in a complete experience from the start. And then I guess what you were alluding to with organization management, like that's to us, it's kind of the other half of the coin where like some businesses sell to individuals and they kind of just need user management. Others sell to businesses, right? B2C versus B2B. And for those B2B companies, they have this mirrored process of onboarding where you tell them what your company is, and then you invite your team and you set everyone's roles and permissions. And if you look at, any big B2B SaaS, like that process is pretty standardized. And so we said, well, why don't we draw a box around that too and offer components for that? So we have another kind of set of components that do that aspect of things for B2B companies.
Yeah, and that's that feels like, if I was describing Clerk to people, I feel like it's like you've thought of all the common practices that anyone would have to do and around.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how we approach it, right? Like these are solved problems. And so we should be able to identify what the best practice is and wrap it in a tidy little box.
Yeah.
Call it a component.
Yeah, call it a component, which is awesome. So that's what Clerk is. And so going back to what happened between their first episode that you did here, and then the kind of like huge inflection point.
Yeah.
Is the classic like graph that everyone wants.
Yeah, I think this is, it's become an increasingly common question I receive. And I think, you know, the short answer is we don't know what happened, which is unfortunate, because we would love to know just as much as everyone else. But, you know, I think in practice, what was going on, you know, first of all, we started Clerk 2019. I think I talked about this on the last episode, where it was just like, off this too hard, we need to find an easier way. And at the time, we thought it was going to be a Ruby gem. And so we started as this Ruby gem, and you know, we kind of just threw it in front of people out of South Park Commons, which was our first investor. And they had this like revolving wheel of people coming in. Like each month they got a new batch of people, and we would just like pounce and be like, hey, look at this. Like, what do you think? And it was just this process of like heat seeking of like, what parts do they like, what parts that they not like. And while we were there, we figured out, okay, we should be doing React components, right? And that was kind of the big learning. And then we ran out of all of that money, but we had figured out like this thing about React. And so that was our like seed fundraise. It's like, you know, we spent this pre-seed money and we know what we want to build now. There's a proof of concept of it, but it's like written with like really janky code. It's absolutely not production ready. And like, we're starting an infrastructure company. We need to raise more, so we can actually get this on robust infrastructure and launch it. So we did that. And then really from the time launch, which was like February 21, all the way through kind of January 23, it didn't feel like it was growing. And, you know, like there's subtle things that I know changed in that time. Like when we launched, it was really positioned as an agnostic product. And the technology was very agnostic. But, you know, if you look at our early launch homepage, you'll see it showed the component like sign in, but then it also showed how to use vanilla JavaScript. So like window.clerk.mount sign in is like an under the hood way to also mount something for vanilla JavaScript developers. And we thought like people would resonate more with the agnostic approach. And I think one big thing we found is that people would prefer, instead of using a Clerk React library, they would want like a Clerk Next.js library. And it was, you know, very hyper focused on Next.js and making sure there's great DX with, at that time it was the pages router, like not just mounting the components, but also kind of determining the backend, or the user is from the backend, or who the user is from the backend. And so we started this process of like tidying it up on a per framework thing and per framework level. And that definitely improved things. But do I think that was like the one thing? No, I think it was a process of like just constantly, it's really the same thing we did in South Park Commons. Put it in front of people, try to get their feedback, try to understand what they like and what they don't like, and make a change. You know, another big one that we changed in that time was like how we set cookies and manage sessions. Like we did a hot swap, and internally it was auth v1 versus auth v2. But there was something that was just, a lot of people were messing up with session management, and we totally changed the architecture. We have these short-lived JWTs now, and like it's set on a different domain than it was originally set. Like there's little subtle changes that we made that would happen to be like a multi-month project, which is terrifying in the context of like a business that's not growing. But that was one I think we definitely got right in hindsight. But yeah, I think there were just so many things, and it was the accumulation that led to, okay, now someone can walk in and pretty reliably, maybe 80-20, have a good experience setting up Clerk. Yeah. And whatever it was that changed, it was like come January 2023, that was our first glimpse at that, I think of like Paul Graham's Startup Equals Growth. It's like this essay that's just drilled into my head just from me reading it. We never did YC, but like 7% growth. There's like that one quantitative thing I could latch onto to know if I'm doing good, right?
That's 7% growth per week.
7% growth per week is what they say is good during YC. And so that January, February was the first time we saw it, and it really felt like, okay, this is like going on its own. Yeah. And then the YouTubers picked it up, and it just went like gangbusters, and it was wild. We had a couple months of just 50, or a couple weeks of like 50% growth, just like nuts, absolutely insane growth. And even through 2024, like we've had some like 30% revenue growth months. It's just like insane. It's been wild, right? Like this, I guess, is what they say product market fit is. I still don't believe I have it, but I think I've done startups for a long time, and I'll never believe I have it.
I don't know. It's like you've got to have the cynicism just to keep you.
Yeah, no, this can't be it yet, right? It can still go faster, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, but it sounds like what you're saying there is like there was some change, whether it was cumulative or something, that the retention or like the how satisfied people were with the product, kind of, it was like a product change, I guess.
Yeah. I guess like one of the overarching things was just like speed to value. Like how quickly does someone get set up with Clerk and recognize like, oh wow, this is cool. Right. And we know internally, like the important thing is you get them signed up, you get them into a new application on their local host right away. You get them through the sign up. The sign up form doesn't impress anyone. I don't know why. The sign up form is like so super powered. People don't care.
And you're talking about the sign up.
The Clerk sign up component, sign in component.
Yeah.
I think they see it and they're just like, oh yeah, like that's just a sign up component. Like, of course that's how it should work. And it doesn't register.
Kind of table stakes.
Like for some people, it'll register that like, oh wow, like Google OAuth is here in development mode, and I didn't go set up OAuth client credentials yet. So some people, like, they'll notice that. For the most part, they just go and sign in, like don't think about it. But when they get back to the application in the sign in state, and we have them drop the user button, which is like that thing that goes in the upper right. You click your avatar, and then you click like manage account. When they see that and they see the depth of like, oh, people can self-serve 2FA, they could change their profile picture, change their password, and so on. Like that's the moment we need to get people to. And we've known that for like 3 years, right? Like if we can get people to that, they'll like it. And so it's just this exercise in like, how do we get them there faster?
Very interesting. Do you remember any of the ones where, I'm sure a lot of them were too small to even describe, but were there any that were like?
I mean, like, like in Next.js, it's very per framework now, right? So in Next.js, we at some point switched from like signed in and signed out components, which is like render children if signed in, render children if signed out. We switched from that to like a middleware based approach to decide rendering page by page. Like little things like that help speed things up. I think the latest on Next.js is actually we're back to signed in, signed out, but only in the header. We've been continuing to play. It's a lot of like, I don't know, the dashboard onboarding itself. We've needed to streamline a lot. Like everywhere, like anything we could come up with, and it's crazy because some of these things are such minor changes, and like you're trying to get rid of, an extra prop.
Yeah.
Can we figure out a way to do this without that prop?
Yeah.
And that's like a 2-month project. One of my big gripes in Next.js App Router, and really old Pages Router, but it got worse in App Router, is they don't have like a splat for wildcard routes. And so when you mount our sign-in component or user profile, like there's routes to it. So it's like /sign-in, but then there's also /sign-in/factor2 or whatever it is. And so we have people mount our component on like a wildcard route so that we have access to that route effectively. But I just hate that developers need to type in Next.js. It's like open square bracket, dot, foo. Like the name doesn't matter. It's like foo or index or what, like you can call it whatever, because Clerk doesn't even look at it. Close bracket. You have to make that folder, and then you have to make a file inside page.tsx. And so it's like two folders, right? First you make the folder called sign in, then you make the square bracket, dot thing, and then you make page.tsx. And it's just like, other frameworks have like a $sign instead of the square bracket madness. And that's my number one request for the Next.js team. Highlight this snippet. Maybe if we get it on Twitter, they'll make the shift. But yeah, just like little things. We hunt for just the tiniest little detail that we can make a little easier.
That makes a lot of sense, the way that you do it. And it's like interesting when you talk about like props and stuff, like because it's just less friction, less things they need to come in and understand, like, how does this work?
Yep.
And how do you kind of know if something is an improvement? I guess if it's like removing a prop, you can say, that's probably better. But if it's like this way versus another way.
Like, I think the data at this point now can reveal something about like more people just succeeding at the setup than before. Early on, it was literally just like looking at people's faces as they tried it.
Okay.
Right. And like if they were getting hung up and snagged somewhere, are they not anymore?
Yeah.
Right. Like that was kind of the heat seeking.
Yeah.
That was such a big part of it early on. Like there wasn't enough data to possibly make a data-driven decision. And so it was just like the same thing that helped you identify, oh, there might be something wrong here, which was never someone saying, hey, I like hate this prop, right? Like it was always just like, where are they getting a little stuck?
They might find this part confusing, and then you think, how can I make this part less confusing?
Yeah. And then you do it, you show it to new people and see if they're getting confused there still or not.
Yeah. And when you're watching someone use it, is it literally you're just sat next to them, ask them to create it?
Yes. I mean, they were, I guess a lot of this is COVID. So it was like Zooms and Google Hangouts and even just like in Discord early on, we had Slack, like just going based on the questions they were asking. In South Park Commons, that initial like switch from Ruby to React, that was sitting next to them. Hey, I need you to try this thing. And that environment was just like perfect for that, because like everyone was kind of like starting something new or like looking for their next thing to start. And so everyone kind of like had the space to like sit down for 10 minutes and try the thing.
Yeah.
It's funny to call it like rapid because it took like a whole year, but like that definitely helped us get there and make that leap.
Yeah.
In a big way.
And it does seem like you're very, very hands-on with all this stuff still, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that that's like, I guess that's a very conscious thing?
Yes. The way I think about it now, this is constantly evolving, right? So over the many years before launch, right, we were a small team and like doing this heat seeking as the small team. And, there wasn't like a great write down what worked after it worked kind of culture. It was just like, okay, like that feels better, like on to the next, right? It's still not working, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And, now the team's growing and we need to build new products and new features on the existing products. And it's really hard for someone new to join Clerk and have all of that context. It's just not possible. I think in so many ways, like what Clerk is doing, components as the new API, like that's new, right? You can't, and I think people get frustrated by this. Like you can't even go look at Stripe, who's been like the figurehead, great DX person for the past decade. Like even that is just like Clerk's just breaking the patterns and it's working. So it's like, what's going on? And so they kind of have to learn from our internal product. Like look at our conventions and just like copy them.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of funny things even with that. And like we're trying to write down like what are the conventions internally so that kind of the onboarding goes faster. But there's been some funny cases where like people do a new thing and I review it and, they clearly copied a convention that Clerk has.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's great. Like, thank you for copying the convention. But that happens to be a convention that like we know is like sandpaper, right? It's just like people don't like it that much. We thought it was like low enough in the like value chain that we haven't fixed it yet.
Yeah.
But that's like not a good one to copy. And so like, why don't you like take this back to the drawing board and like change that, come up with something better. And then like, while we're at it, we're also fix the old thing that we hadn't gotten around to fixing yet. And it's just like, how can I possibly like do all of that knowledge transfer to a new team efficiently? And I think we're trying to figure it out. And there was a small team there. And so a lot of us do have the context, but figuring out how do we transfer it to new people is so far an unsolved problem. It's also my personal favorite like part of the job. So like that, like it kind of inherently like that's the part I want to keep a hand in. Whereas like there are people better at operations than me that love operations in a way that I just don't. And so we could hire someone for that, right? So that's kind of how I look at it.
It always seems like the things that a startup is good at kind of come from the obsessions of the founders.
I agree. I think obsession is like a good way to put it too, right? I love, I don't know, I like I'll be the one to like randomly put a comment in just like, hey, I think we have this prop on this component and it actually just doesn't need to be there. I did that last week and I did that at like 2 a.m. and I woke up to a message. I was just like, hey, Colin, why were you thinking about this at 2 a.m.? And I forget. It was like some customer thing had come in late at night and I was like walking through it with them. And it's just like,
that, I saw the one on Twitter where like Jacob on your team was like quote tweeting you about like, oh, my boss loves Orf or something. And when I looked at it, I was like, there are a lot of words I have no idea what you're talking about there. It's like,
that was, I guess that's another thing that is probably surprising. To some extent, it's definitely a big part of what's driving DX, but like, I am in a lot of ways still like the resident like cookie and authentication expert at Clerk. And so, I think the particular tweet you're talking about is, responding to a thread about, is someone's auth setup okay? And it was just like an open source thing. And so I was able to look at it and I called out that, the access token was like script accessible and it was long lived. And so if there's an XSS attack, an attacker will be able to use it indefinitely, basically. But I recognize that it's weird to some extent that I have the degree of depth on
Good.
on that stuff. I think it's I think it's
weird,
helpful
good.
for Clerk. Yeah. It's really hard to find people who love like web application security, like down to these nitty details.
That was going to be my question, actually. Is it like really hard to hire?
I think that particular role is, it is hard to hire. It's just like, you know what I'd compare it to? Malte at Vercel. He does this like regular post on his blog about like what's happening in the web. And they're like these crazy browser changes, like, oh, this like RFC from 5 years ago, like finally shipped in Chrome.
Yeah.
But he does it every month, and you could just tell like he loves it.
Yeah.
All right. And for whatever reason, I've just always kind of loved the like auth, like specs and the crazy ways that people break into auth systems. And like just there's so many layers of protection in web app security where, that case we were talking about, like it's all, if there's an XSS, then someone can get this token out and that's bad. And it's like, that's already a high bar, right? And I think I know that, but like it's still like the culture in web app security is very much, assume that all of the bad things are going to happen and still protect with another layer.
Yeah.
And I've just always loved that. I've loved reading how people think of solving the things. And it's a little obsessive, I suppose.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that I always say to people is like, if someone, like when you drill down, like why has this company got good developer experience, or why is this company really good at like shipping things fast or something? It's like always when you drill down, it's like, oh, the founder was obsessed with it. That's like, and I guess the culture kind of follows from that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's not the only way, right? Like, hopefully we can hire people that are obsessed with their own areas and drive strong culture in other features too.
Well, let me throw that back actually as like a question, because I have this hunch that it's like pretty hard to actually, in reality, like do that, and whether we should like try to do that, or whether we just kind of lean into like, okay, we're really good at this. We'll also try to cover the bases here, but like realistically, do you think someone can come in who's not like a founder and kind of create like not just like good, but like outstanding?
I mean, I do think it's possible. I think it definitely requires strong buy-in from everyone, but like you see it happen. And I guess like as an example, if you look at like Cloudflare's push into workers, right? Like they were this WAF security company that sold to like CISOs to start, or at least like IT teams, like put something in front of the app so that the app doesn't need to deal with the traffic if we get DDoSed. And, it was done in a way that was like almost independent of the developers working on building the thing. And they did something, I don't know, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever it was when they started Workers. But like somehow that organization feels like it just, turned on a dime and suddenly they're just churning out products in, application infrastructure.
Yeah.
And, I guess I don't actually know. Like, is Matthew Prince like in the weeds with the workers team every day? And like, yeah, maybe it is him that's just obsessive about it. But I think at least that's not the case. I think like there's maybe he made space for it, but like they hired a team that just got after it, and they got after it aggressively, and they were passionate about it. And yeah, like, so I think it's like possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to find those examples, right? And yeah, I guess like Zuck is maybe doing it right now with Llama.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's so cool.
Yeah. It seems like he's very much in the weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's true. Yeah. So that's not that's more an example of the founder being obsessive. I agree.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good time to talk about SPC as well, South Park Comics.
Yeah.
They had Zuck.
Yes.
Were you at the Zuck?
I was at the Zuck thing. It was great. Yeah. I mean, I think my big takeaway was, you know, I think I at least look at Facebook like through these like rose-colored glasses of like, they had it so easy. It just like kind of flew from the start and to where it is today. And I think what I enjoyed about that talk so much was just like, it's just like another founder with the same exact problems that everyone else has. And yeah, I think like maybe there were some differences in like the very early days where it was just getting pulled out of like, or the market was just pulling it out of their hands in such a big way. But yeah, eventually it got to this place of like, no, we need to scale up an engineering team, and that's hard, and we need to hire executives, and that's hard. I think he said he like wiped out his whole exec hiring at some point. I think it was on like Peter Thiel's advice, because it was just like, Thiel was just like, you don't seem to like these people. I think you should find people you like and prioritize that. Yeah. Which is, it's like, you know, that's something that's like, so every founder struggles with it. Right. And you know, the answer probably isn't hire friends for every founder, but it was just cool to hear him talk about the same things that every other founder is dealing with in a way that, you know, those rose-colored glasses don't really assume exist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it felt like it was just like easy street. Somehow Sheryl Sandberg got in there and everything just kept working and the whole way. And it was just this massive behemoth. And like, I don't know, like that was always kind of my perception. Like it just felt like it was easy for some reason. And so just, hearing him talk super candidly about it was like, and of course you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, of course it's like everyone else. Like, why would it be different? Yeah. But yeah, it's still actually nice to hear it.
Yeah. I listened to like a teeny bit because my friend was there. But I didn't catch the whole thing. I'd love to see it.
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, no, the whole thing. Yeah. It was fantastic. Cool. Definitely.
Cool. Okay.
Definitely highly recommended talk.
Okay, I'll watch that. Put it in the show notes, hopefully. If I remember. I will.
It helped a lot that like he was, I believe, like more candid, because Suruchi and Aditya, the founders of SBC, like they were his early team.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was this element of, like, yeah, you're just my friend and my old boss. And so there's just like the guard was so far down. And it was a really fun chat.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then talking about hiring, someone that I'm good friends with, Nick, is in your team now. Nick Parsons, shout out Nick.
Yeah.
And I know that he's someone that I look up to a lot on, like, I think he's great. And so kind of wondered what sort of things Nick has been doing. Been trying to get him on the show, but he's kind of
Oh,
been a bit shy about it.
Is
but-
Nick reluctant? we can push him on. Yeah. I mean, so Nick, for context, he's our like head of marketing. I might be mistitling him by accident, but he's
just
the
he's someone
leader
that gets it-
of
gets
the
it done.
marketing
Yeah.
side of Clerk. And we hired him, I think, right before we did our first chat, if I recall correctly.
I think it was actually a little bit after.
Okay.
I think it was I'm sure it was around like February
Got it.
23, I think.
Okay.
I think it was like just as you were like
It was definitely like
was like-
just
it was mid.
as yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's like broadly someone that's trying to get us in front of more developers, and very hard role to hire for. I think largely because just most people don't understand developers, right? The typical marketing playbook is like buy paid ads. It's just like, it's not very inspiring traditionally. Sorry, that sounds awful. But
it's true though.
I
mean,
think,
it's like, yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
yeah, like finding people that actually like,
care about developers.
yeah, like empathize with developers
Yeah.
and, understand the ways that they like really don't
Yeah.
want to be sold to.
Yeah.
And, Nick is often the one pushing back, saying like,
It's too salesy. Or,
or well, not just that, but like, hey, like the product needs to be better. Like he's so
yeah.
product-led growth,
Yeah.
like mindset. And so, he just brings the right mentality to the role. And yeah, it lends itself a lot to like the things Clerk does, right?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to like actually connect with developers and make sure we're solving their problems. Like we're not just trying to get a logo or a link in front of their face, right? Even like the next auth sponsorship we do, it's looking for a hosted alternative. It's not, looking for something better, right?
Yeah.
It's like we understand that there are, developers on both sides of this argument or debate or whatever. And like, we want them to know the option exists, but we don't want it to be so salesy, I guess. Like, I'm not sure. I feel like developers probably know what I'm going after
Yeah.
when I'm talking like this, but it's hard to describe. And I think this is why it's so hard to find someone for the role. You just kind of need to empathize with developers. And I think it's almost, I suspect it's unique to developer tools marketing.
Yeah.
Like it's just like its own subset that just works a little differently because its audience is so
Yeah.
like they're most of the time they have ad block on. Right? It's just like the only audience where that's a problem I have to deal with.
I feel it's actually kind of similar to when you describe about like the kind of knowledge transfer of like how your best practices, because it's like you could one thing go and like look at the best practices for developer marketing, but there's probably like many kind of like gotchas within it that like unless you've like actually like stared at code like why the hell isn't this working and like pushed it out and gone through that whole process, worked in developer teams, it's like very hard to actually cover that full kind of remit. And Nick is someone that's like, shipped a lot of code in his life and like, I think has that both sides of the brain.
Yeah. He's got the right lens for it. Super lucky. I shouldn't be talking about him because there's just people are going to start poaching him left and right.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I think it's...
And then also like I got to see up close one of your campaigns where you were like, I think Nick had like found this van that you've like
Yes.
covered in
The van.
covered in Clerk vinyls.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about your van?
Yeah. Nick gets credit for the execution. I think this one was my idea.
What was your idea?
But we'll have to have him on so you can settle the score on that one.
Okay.
Basically, high level pieces is actually, it comes back to Y Combinator. So, Y Combinator, huge batch. At least one of those companies is going to become $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And so Clerk thinks it would be good to just like have all of them as customers, right? But like we're not in YC, that puts us at a disadvantage for getting in front of them. Right? They have this like thing called Bookface where we can put a deal up, and our deal is not allowed to have a logo on it because we're not a YC company, which is just like, and so it becomes this fun little battle of like, all right, well, how do I get in front of them? How do I meet them? And we had heard that a company last batch put this billboard on a building. It's not a billboard. It's like a window covering on a building like a block away from the YC office. Because in the area, there actually are no billboards by the YC office. But I guess they knew that like a lot of YC founders there's like an apartment over there that I guess a lot of them stay in. So they like walk this stretch and they go past the building and they see it. And I was like, well, that building's taken now.
Yeah.
So what else can we do? And came up with this idea of like, well, let's just buy a van and wrap it with a big old Clerk logo and just park it in front of the office. They have metered parking in front of the office. And so, we knew when YC started, and Nick found the van. Nick like worked with the design team to get the like vinyl on it, and Nick like executed the whole thing after the idea, and the idea is like meaningless, but I'll still take credit for the idea. And then we wake up every morning at I think we get there like 6:30.
You're still doing it?
Oh yeah.
So it's for the whole.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then they're doing a fall batch, so it's not stopping.
Oh my God.
Year round. Yeah. Don't drive to YC. Take an Uber. The spot's going to be taken now. But yeah, like so, like that was literally the strategy. Just like we need them to at least know about us. We need to be in the conversation. We know a lot of them haven't picked off yet, and this is a way to brute force it a little bit. What's been fun is because it's on wheels, we can just bring it to a bunch of other places. And so it was like at GitHub the other day, it was like Cloudflare the other day. It just like goes wherever someone's doing an event, we try to bring the van. And we did the DX drink up at Southern Pacific. We parked it in front. That one took some social engineering because we actually took like one of the bar's like reserved spots. And they're like, oh, you can't park there. And we were like, oh, but we're the event. And they let us do it.
Really?
Okay.
Small. Right.
Yeah. It's a fun little like, sidecar to the whole thing.
It's been funny visiting SF because it feels like that it's like a local marketing almost. There's a lot of like local marketing.
I mean, like right now, and I've been here on and off since 2019, but like since this AI wave started, I think it has the highest concentration of founders I've ever felt. Yeah. And it's just like the number of events and the size of the events of like AI founders just working together and collaborating and ideating and just building cool things, like trying to figure out how we can leverage this technology to do anything. Yeah. It's just been so fun. Yeah. And it's definitely gotten the city like booming again, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just feels,
exciting.
electric. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're just like grateful to your sign-in form. Right? It's so like I kind of. It's funny. I don't know.
Oh, everyone needs it, right?
Everyone needs it. Yeah.
A shovel.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, Colin, thank you so much. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah. And where can people learn more about Clerk?
Clerk.com.
Clerk.com.
Very
That's
easy.
another story. But anyway.
Yeah.
for another time.
There you go.
Clerk.com.
Hard domain acquisition process, but we got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.